Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, Jennifer and I are going to have another installment of Book Chat. And today, all right, people, I'm putting on my reading glasses so I can read what we're talking about. We are reading, and Jennifer's holding up the book. It's called Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life, Life-Changing Tools for Healthy Relationships by Marshall Rosenberg, Ph.D. Jennifer, why did you want to talk about this particular book?
I had a feeling you might ask that question. I may have found myself in a new relationship.
Oh,
Isn't that exciting? I am dating
awesome.
someone. I am in love. And my love, probably based on my communication style, mailed me this book.
That's love right there, baby. Hi, honey, I love you. Here's this book.
Here's this book. Maybe we could work on your communication just a little.
That's awesome.
Actually, I think it's really cool because you and I have talked before about like really desiring to date a feminist man or a man who's willing to talk about things, willing to put the issues out there. And this man is willing to do so, but he has been studying this nonviolent communication. In fact, today he is presenting a class. Well, he's not presenting, he's helping to present a class, a 6-week. He's going to get all mad because I have this all wrong. It tells you how much I pay attention to when he's speaking. But
it's okay. We're at the beginning of learning nonviolent communication, which involves active listening. So it's okay. It's okay. We're
right. So he is helping to facilitate a class that one of the, I don't know if you could ever really call someone an expert in nonviolent communication, but someone who's been certified to teach it. Yeah. He is going to be the helper in that class. Oh, I don't remember if it's 6 weeks, 6 months. Honestly, I don't remember. The first installment, which is this weekend, is Friday night and Saturday, and people are attending that class. So he's been through the class one time fully, and now he's helping to facilitate it. Needless to say, what I noticed right away in our budding relationship was his ability to communicate effectively was very strong. And I had some troubles with some of the concepts and some things where I felt like my voice was sort of stuck in my throat and I couldn't really like get it out. And speaking with him over a few months now and reading the book has really helped me to figure out like some of the reasons why I might have not wanted to speak out loud. Sometimes I still want to speak out loud and it still gets stuck, but I think there were things I was doing as sort of protection mechanism and I wasn't sharing what I was actually feeling.
Got it. Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. I think a lot of people are probably in that situation. I mean, I'm sure I'm in that same situation.
Well, and the other thing I thought, Raquel, is you and I always talk about how we want to have the hard conversations. We always say the podcast is here so we can discuss difficult topics. And I think that the technique in this book, although I wouldn't say it's law or everyone has to follow it 100%. In fact, one of the things I like that he says is if you follow too much of a script, it's not authentic. The script or the procedure of nonviolent communication can help give us tools to better support one another in a conversation, even if we're having conflict, and perhaps even could help in situations where there would be violence or war or even verbal violence. I've experienced a lot of verbal violence myself in my life, where I think if we were really coming from a loving place and we were trying to speak in loving manners towards each other, even when we disagree, I just feel like we could get a lot further.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Since I picked this book and sent it to you and you didn't have any idea really what the pick was about, what were your first impressions? Were you like, what the hell is this?
I will say that my first reaction to it, or maybe one of my first reactions, was that there's a certain amount of, or an assumption of a certain amount of privilege in the steps or the skills or the process basically of nonviolent communication. That kind of stood out to me a little bit, and I kept wondering, how would this play out, or how would it change in communities of color, or the where communities of color come into contact with majority cultures, or communities that are not quote unquote of color. I think some of what he talks about would be different in those situations, because there's a lot of speaking with each other with love and letting go of assumptions and just listening and going beyond the aggression or violence that you hear in someone's voice. And part of what I was thinking was, you may think that you're hearing aggression and violence in somebody's voice, but that's not what's really there. I know I've been accused before of where I was just like talking excitedly about something, and I was told that I was yelling at someone. And I was like, I wasn't yelling.
That is exactly what I noticed when I went to Jerry and the men spoke versus when the women spoke. When the men were in their group and they were talking about their experience, their voices were so much louder. They weren't yelling, but they spoke with conviction, they spoke strongly, and they spoke louder. And I felt like, oh, I knew they weren't yelling,
Yeah.
but it was very different. And then also with Matthew, he also, his voice, when he feels his passion, his voice gets louder and louder, and he speaks with the words of nonviolent communication. And yet there is something in his voice that's very different about the way that, well, I live in this little bubble with all women where we might be loud around here and chitty chatty, but we're not loud like that. It's the volume.
There's a different weight to the voice of a man,
Yeah.
as opposed to generally speaking,
Right.
not all men's voices have that depth to them, but generally there's a weight to a man's voice that just hits the air differently than a woman's voice generally. So I get it. It has more punch to it sometimes.
Well, let's go back a minute to what you said about different communities. One of the things that was interesting when we first started chatting on the phone before we decided to be a couple is that he was trying to communicate in this way with, I guess we should explain what the way is. The nonviolent communication pill is basically saying you observe first, you express your feelings, you express the need that's behind your feelings, and then you ask for whatever your request is. So when A, I feel B because I'm needing C, therefore I would like D. So you're making your conversation real clear. He was speaking in those terms, but since I've never been exposed to this, I didn't understand it at all. And I was responding to him. I wasn't speaking in nonviolent communication. I was speaking in the way that Marshall would he would term it life alienating communication when we don't have a whole lot of skill, or we haven't learned this skill or some other skill. What I think he was doing was trying to look for what were my feelings, what were my needs, what was my request behind the unskilled words that I was using. So in that regard, I think if we were going into communities, let's say a school system or a workplace, or like you said, a community of color where you felt like they hadn't had the training, any space. If one of us had been trained, we would be using the techniques to communicate, but we would also be using the techniques to hear, because we couldn't expect the other group to know something they've never been exposed to.
Right.
Because our whole society does not speak like this.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'd
So
say
I don't know.
maybe only like 2%. No, probably bigger, more than that. But yeah, I think very, very few people speak in this way, at least purposely. I think there are people who try to speak in similar ways, or at least try to listen in certain ways. For instance, active listening. Like, I think that is something that people are maybe a little more familiar with. When you're in a conversation, you're actually listening to the person and trying to listen to what they're actually saying, as opposed to listening for when you can speak again.
So that was your initial response. After you read the entire book, did you have a different response, or does that hold through? Is that a through line?
I think there's still some of that through line there. I understand. What's the
Give it
right
to us.
word?
Tell us.
Yeah. I think I understand where he's coming from a little bit better now that I've read the whole book. I do wonder, though, is it even possible for nonviolent communication to be utilized on a grand scale? I mean, I would like for it to be. I don't know if there's enough allowance in nonviolent communication for different cultural values, ways of speaking, ways of expressing, to actually have a place in nonviolent communication. I don't know how it can be utilized broadly.
Well, it's a really interesting question because having read the book, I feel a lot of insecurity or ineptness of actually being able to do it.
Okay. Why is that?
Because, well, it's interesting because what did we say? Okay, observation. We're making an observation of something. It's really difficult for me to not make an observation without, as he puts in the book, putting a moralistic judgment on it. So if I'm upset with something and I want to have it out with someone, like let's say my love, and I want to say, you're not paying attention to me. Let's say I said it that way.
Yeah.
I need more attention. You're not paying attention to me.
Yeah.
I don't feel loved. Whatever I'm trying to say, I'm trying to
Yeah.
observe.
Yeah.
When I say something like, you're not paying attention to me, there is sort of a judgment in there. I think I would need the workshop that he's going to, because I think that this would take a lot of practice to put into effort, because we have been raised in a society where very few people are speaking in this manner or even trying to speak in this manner.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, there was a lot that I thought, oh, I really like that. It makes a lot of sense. But in practice, it's really difficult. So first there's the observation, and then you connect to your feelings. So let's say I'm talking to him about that same thing. You're not paying attention to me. So instead I say, I observe when I'm speaking, you're doing your email. And then I try to connect to my feelings. Well, my feeling could be, I feel abandoned, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not actually a feeling. So then I
Mm-hmm.
got to dig deeper. Abandoned's not a feeling. What I'm feeling is a disconnection. I feel lonely. I
Mm-hmm.
want connection. So it's really hard for me to even identify the feeling to start
Mm-hmm.
with. And then it's hard for me to. So he says the next thing is, after we get our feeling, we need to say what we're needing. It would be
Mm-hmm.
really hard for me to know that I needed connection. I needed something for my loneliness. See, I don't even know how to put it now. And then what am I asking for?
Yeah.
And to
See,
make that clear,
it's assuming a whole fuck ton of work that has already happened.
a lot
And
of skill.
yeah, but if you have to accomplish all of that before you can actually express yourself, so a lot of people who aren't going to be expressing.
Well, a lot of people aren't expressing anyway.
Well, right, but that's why I feel like maybe this isn't as accessible as I think Rosenberg wants it to be. It's funny that you bring up abandonment because I actually disagree with him. I do think abandonment is a feeling. You
You
can
do?
feel abandoned. I really do. You absolutely can feel abandoned. I do think that is an emotion.
Well, he's saying abandoned is the verb. Like I am being abandoned, but what is the feeling? The feeling is disconnection.
The feeling is also you feel abandoned. See, that's what, because you can feel abandoned. A word, it can be more than one thing. I think his approach is a little
Okay,
too
but
simplistic, and that was another thing. That was another problem that I had.
isn't the feeling of abandoned though means that someone else is responsible for it, whereas the feeling of disconnected means I'm responsible for my own feeling, where abandoned means somebody else did the abandoning. I'm just asking
Yeah,
because I
no,
am trying to
I get your point.
understand.
I do. I get your point. I get your point.
It's the
But
responsibility piece.
I get that. But say a little kid doesn't have any responsibility for the person that left and how they make them feel. Or if, say, you're in a, as an adult, you're in a, what you believe to be a loving, whether it's romantic or whatever, you're in a relationship with someone, another person, romantic or otherwise, and that person leaves, and you're like, well, fuck, I am abandoned. I have been abandoned. I feel abandoned. Abandoned is still a feeling. I mean, it's still a matter of something inside of you being hurt.
There's what you are. You're hurt.
Sure, sure, but I don't know. I don't know.
All right, let's go back to one step here.
Okay.
Because there's something very not basic, very important that
Mhm.
you said in that, where you said the little kid, the parent leaves and they're abandoned.
Right.
This is really big for me because this was in my dad's work, and I have asked my dad to bring me all of his books so I can read them, because his books remind me very much of these books.
Oh, very cool.
One of the things I grew up with my father was, he said all the time, no one can make you feel anything. They can do all kinds of actions, but how you choose to react to that is your responsibility.
I get that.
I grew up with that as a cornerstone of my existence.
Okay.
When I had kids, I started saying the same thing to them.
Okay.
And oh no, my girls did not. No, they said, mom, he hit me. That makes me sad.
Yeah.
He hit me. I'm sad.
Yeah.
Right. And I said, no, they can't make you feel that way. They can hit you and you can choose to be sad. That's what I learned growing up. And my kids were like, no. He hit me. I'm sad. It's his fault.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is some gray area in there, right?
Yeah.
The difference that I read in Marshall's work, and maybe it's in my dad's work too, and I just never grasped it. But the difference of what he's saying is, the kid who did the hitting does an action, and that triggers something in the person who is hit. Of course it does, because it's an action. And they then can choose how to interpret it. And sometimes they're going to interpret it by being sad. And sometimes they're going to interpret it and they're going to dig a little deeper if they're like the better person, which is what this is all about. And they're going to be like, I wonder what need that person had for hitting me. This sounds ludicrous, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, but maybe hitting's too violent. Maybe they called him a name like, hey, stupid.
Yeah. Okay.
And the stupid made me feel bad.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying that his words can't actually make you feel bad. You choose to feel bad. Okay. And most of us do. That's our reactionary nature.
Yeah.
But we could choose to look at it and think, geez, I wonder we could show empathy. Geez, I wonder what's going on with him that he needs to call me stupid, and not take it personally, and realize that, oh, maybe his dad just yelled at him and then he came over here and yelled at me. And that's a very, very mature thing to be able to do.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
you'd have to be sitting in a good place to be able to do that. Yeah, the accessibility of it is a really interesting thing, Raquel. My kids called me out and they were like, he made me mad. And my dad said, no, you're choosing to be mad. So I've been caught between them my whole life.
Yeah.
All right, let's step back a second.
Okay.
In chapter 1, Marshall talks about why he decided to do this work, which I thought was really interesting. He said there were 2 questions that he thought about his whole life. Quote, what happens to disconnect us from our compassionate nature, leading us to behave violently and exploitatively? And conversely, what allows some people to stay connected to their compassionate nature, even under the most trying circumstances? And that is what he was kind of prompted to consider, because he was growing up in Detroit when the race riot started. And he was like, how come some people are perpetrated upon and they turn violent and they have violent speak and violent reactions? And how come other people are perpetrated upon and they have that compassion that we were just talking about?
Mhm.
And they're able to work towards a solution. They probably weren't following nonviolent communication, but they're able to do it a different way. And that's what kind of led to his work. What do you think about those 2 main questions?
They're very interesting questions, and I think they're paramount to just understanding human nature in general.
Right.
I think it's more than just this person reacted this way and this person reacted that way. I think there's more to it than that, and I don't know that we can necessarily boil it down to a simple answer. For instance, the whole idea of nature versus nurture, right? There's, say, siblings living in the same house under the same parents. They turn out to be 2 very different people. And you ask them about their childhood and you could get 2 totally different answers.
Oh,
Then again,
totally.
if you have like identical twins, separate them, like adopt them out to 2 totally different families, and still there's similarities to them. That whole struggle or back and forth between, is it nature, is it nurture, is it nature, is it nurture, that's always going to be there. And I don't necessarily know, as much as we know as a society and as learned as some people are, I don't know if we're ever going to really answer which one it is over something else.
Do you think it comes down to compassion? Some people inherently feel compassion, or do you think it comes down to some people learned compassion, or do you think that has nothing to do with it?
Yes, and.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes,
my favorite.
The example that keeps coming up in my head is Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King Jr. Malcolm X, I mean, again, this is very distilled, but Malcolm X, by any means necessary. Martin Luther King Jr., love above all else, right? Nonviolent communication. They both had compassion for their communities, for people who wanted to be allies, people who were, what's the word I'm looking for? Disillusioned, but it came across differently in both of them. And as they each got older, they were meeting in the middle.
So we need both.
I think we do. I think we do need both. I don't think it's, yes, I think nonviolent communication is important. There is a skill to being able to have a significant and difficult conversation, especially with somebody who is at the height of their emotion, or if you yourself are at the height of your emotion. It takes a lot of skill to move beyond that emotion or to step aside and have the conversation anyway. I think Rosenberg, and I know I don't know. I think he's written other books. I didn't do that much research, but I think he's written other books. And I would like to see if in other books, and like, books that came after this one, if that developed and grew a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And became a little more nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like in some ways there's a level of nuance that's missing in what, at least the way that he's saying it here. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate the book at all. And I think it's important that we learn the skill of being able to have conversations where someone is either opposed to what we're saying, or we're in the heat of the emotion, or or any other number of hurdles that might be there to having a conversation. I do think the conversations are important. It is important to be able to communicate with people who are different from yourself. I think there's more to it than what he talks about in the book. And one thing that comes up for me is when he's saying, you as the listener observe what is happening, but you're observing from your own lens. If you haven't been exposed to a different lens, then who's saying your observation is correct?
Well, I don't know if he's necessarily saying your observation has to be correct. What I think he's saying is when you communicate, the first thing you communicate is your observation. So it would be like, I observe you typing your emails while I'm trying to talk to you. That may be not correct in my love's head. He might be thinking, oh, I'm quickly getting this done so I can spend time with her. But my observation is I observe you typing while I'm talking to you. Let me see if I can do this right. I observe you typing while I'm talking to you. I feel disconnected because I'm needing love and connection. Therefore, I would like when I'm speaking to you for you to turn away from your computer and for you to listen. Oh my God, that's so hard. It's hard because I don't even know what the fuck I want most of the time.
I think most of us don't.
I have not been in touch with what do I want? And I have not been in touch with what am I feeling? And I certainly would have told you as a feminist woman, I don't need nothing. I don't need you. I don't need your shit. Right. So
I don't need a man.
This is really interesting because I'm trying to break all of those old patterns within myself, those walls, those things. And so I don't know if I will ever communicate in this way, but I am trying to be like, okay, what is it? What am I actually observing that's bothering me? And what are my feelings about that? And what is my need? Now, here's an interesting thing that Rosenberg says. He says that a need is only a need if it is shared, making it universal human need. So if there's something I need, but no one else does, it's not really a universal need. So these things that we're putting into our needs list, I know that needs list in the book wasn't super long. If I have the need for love, everybody has the need for love. If I have the need for security, everybody has the needs for security. And I think maybe we can kind of agree on that to some regard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If I'm needing connection, every human is needing connection.
Yeah.
Oh, and what the other thing that's really interesting to me about that as a feminist, maybe this isn't even a feminist seal. Maybe this is just as a woman who did a lot of online dating, as you all know, because I'm a trampy hoe. Anyway.
Yes.
I'm not really a trampy hoe, but whatever. Neediness. We don't want people to think we're needy. We don't want people to think we have needs. We definitely don't want to date someone and go on a date and have them walking away thinking, oh my gosh, she's so needy. I don't want to date her. So we pretend like we're aloof and we're the cool girl.
Yep.
And we're not like other girls. We don't need that. We're all good. You can just call me once every 3 weeks. It's no big deal. I'm all good. But meanwhile, we have a need for connection. It's a universal need. We have a need for connection. We have a need for love. And our society does not want us to acknowledge that.
That is very true.
our society doesn't want us to date a man who's needy, doesn't want a man to admit he's needy. We don't want a woman to say she's needy.
Nope.
And
Nope.
yet we all have these universal needs, the same need that I have, you have, Matthew has. Every single guy I've dated on online dating has those same needs.
Yes.
But we all pretended like we didn't.
Yeah.
That's
And
fucked up.
yes, it is. Absolutely.
If
So
I didn't learn one thing from the book, that is valuable, that we need to stop pretending like we don't have needs. And I have been doing that. In my marriage, I told my husband, I don't need you. I'm an independent woman. I don't need you. How loving is that? Oh, I would just run to be your husband. I thought that was real. I thought that was, I don't have needs. I can do everything myself.
Yep.
That is a feminist issue, I believe. I believe we have been socialized to pretend maybe it's needs, maybe it's wants, but we don't have them.
No, not at all. We aren't the ones who are supposed to have needs. We're supposed to cater to other people's needs because we don't have any of our own.
Even if I could do this one thing after reading this book, this one takeaway is decide that, yes, I'm a human being and I actually do have the need and want of human connection. Mm-hmm. That's why I've been doing
wrong with needing and wanting human connection. There's
why the hell else have I been on 8 million thousand dates on online dating if I didn't need and want human connection?
Yeah. There right? You go. Yeah.
So I've identified a need within myself. So if I use nonviolent communication, or at least some steps of it, to learn to ask for what I want instead of pretending like I don't, the chances of me receiving that have just exploded. Yeah. So even if we're not trying to stop a fight, like maybe nonviolent communication and really heated arguments is maybe a little tougher, but what if I was just expressing to my love that I wanted more attention and I learned a nice way to say that? Or what if, I don't know, what if in our partnership we had what if I wanted to do a book that you didn't want to do and I expressed my need of why I wanted to do this book? Then you would be able to hear me in a way and say, oh, I see you have this need. Mm-hmm. And you could say yes or no. Yeah. But we would be communicating in a clearer way about what it was we were desiring. Yeah. That's where the book is valuable because we have suppressed this as a society. We are not taught how to communicate effectively. No. That is not a skill that we as a society are big on. It's not something that really gets a lot of attention, and it's not something that's actually considered very important to pick up. It's not taught in school. You might learn about this if you're like a communications major in college, maybe, or you go to a workshop somewhere, but you won't hear about that workshop if you aren't already tuned to this sort of thing. So as a society in general, there's not a whole lot of talk about it. It's always be nicer, be businesslike, be professional, or don't argue, don't sass somebody, right? Like be respectful. But what does all of that mean? It doesn't really mean anything because the thing I heard the most strong, because I've heard this before, directed at myself, don't sass. Mm-hmm. Well, what does sass mean? If my mother or my coworker or someone said to me, don't sass me, then I have to analyze from my own head, what does that even mean? Yep. But if they said something like, I noticed you're speaking in a disruptive manner and I'm feeling hurt by that. And my need is to be heard by you. Hey, I'm getting better at this already. Yeah. And what I'm requesting is that you stop talking and you listen to me. Oh, I love that. I'm requesting you stop talking and you listen to me. No, I don't know. There you go. But what I'm saying is that I don't know if we need to speak in this formula. I think it's just really great practice to identify for yourself. Mm-hmm. What the fuck am I feeling? What did we call it? Whether abandonment is a emotion or not, who cares? Because what am I feeling? If I'm feeling abandoned, whether that is technically an emotion or not, doesn't really matter What matters is, what is my need?
Yeah.
What am I not getting that I need?
Yeah.
And how can I ask for that in a way that might get it for me?
Yeah. Well, yeah, what you're saying, being able to identify what I'm actually feeling. This has come up in other conversations, specifically with men or conversations about men,
Right.
where I can't remember who our guest was, where they were talking about men wanting connection, and the only way that they know to get that connection is through sex. But what
Simon fucked.
yeah, and well, basically what they want is connection. And the only acceptable way that society says to get tenderness from somebody or to have closeness is to have sex.
Is to pursue sex.
Exactly.
But can you imagine a man coming up to you at the club and going, I observe your beautiful structure. I am feeling lack of connection. Okay, what's next? Because I am needing connection, I would like to request you come home with me. And what would we do? We wouldn't even know what to do.
I'm pretty sure once the stunned feeling subsided, I think I would then laugh.
And if he
And
looked good, you'd probably go home with him.
well, I'd at least give him a little bit of time, and have a little conversation. But I think I'd be completely stunned. I'd be like,
Nobody talks like that.
nobody talks like that. Nobody talks like that at all.
Right.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That would be so funny.
But maybe that would help. That would help Simon with his game. Just be clear about what you're asking for. I want sex because I need to feel connection.
There you go. Just put that right out there.
Actually,
and that's gonna work with somebody.
I think it might work with me.
There you go.
No, not remember when Simon said that? That was a big realization for me in my marriage. Just think about what I just said. I just said to him, I don't need nobody. I don't need a man. I don't need you in my life. Gee, I wonder if he was feeling some lack of connection.
Yeah.
But we didn't know how to communicate with one another. We didn't know I didn't know what I needed. He didn't know what he needed. We didn't know how to talk. So I think it would be really weird to talk to someone who only talked in this pattern over and over. It wouldn't be very authentic.
No.
But using the technique to inform your conversation to at least know what you want. And then I think another really interesting thing is using it to listen when other people speak. What are they really asking for? What are they feeling? We might have to guess, as Marshall says in his book, we might have to guess at first what they're feeling because they're not telling us. And then what is the universal need that they're trying to express? And is that something we can help them get? I actually think this might be a great technique in families and close relationships and partnerships like we have, rather than trying to stop a war between two countries.
Right. Well, and I think it's also asking the follow-up questions, trying to dig deeper. Rosenberg talks about he was giving a talk at a conference and somebody in the audience was like, "You're the most arrogant man I've ever heard." And then he was like, let's get beyond that. And he actually asked the follow-up questions of, are you feeling this because I did X? And then the person answered and he goes, okay, are you feeling that because of Y? And then, and so he went and then he goes, okay, so what I think you're saying is A, B, C. Is that correct? And the person's like, exactly.
And then he feels heard.
Yeah. And there's more to all of this than just observing or trying to hear, oh, there's something beneath this person's statement or mood or reaction. It's, I think something's going on. This is what I'm observing. If the situation calls for it or if it's appropriate at the time, ask the person, I'm observing X. Is this because of Y? Or I believe it might be this. Am I correct in that assumption? Or whatever. I mean, there's different ways to put it. The onus is on the listener to actually engage the person and truly engage them, not just waiting for their turn to speak.
But that would imply that the person cared about the conversation and wanted to know what was going on and wanted to fix it. One of the things he said on page 23, I think is really important. He said, quote, "When we are in contact with our feelings and needs, we humans no longer make good slaves and underlings."
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that part?
Mm-hmm. I do.
And I thought, ding, 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 ding. Because if you apply that to our school situation, our work situation, our, I guess just work, but when we're going in and we're producing and producing and producing, and we have talked about having bad bosses and the way that they've talked to us. I remember working and not understanding why I was working.
Mm-hmm.
Not realizing I had a need in the situation, not realizing, not being in touch with what my feelings were around it. I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
Well, what came up for me when I read that part of the book is, if people are so overworked or, I don't know, consumed by external circumstances, they don't have time to think about or investigate what they're feeling. It's literally get up, go to work, come home, and repeat the next day. That's all there is. There's no time for self-reflection. If you don't have time for self-reflection, you literally are a cog in the wheel. You are not being fully actualized as a human being, because all you're doing is you're
Producing.
you're just producing. You are a worker bee. You're a slave to the system. That is all you're doing.
So here's what he says: life alienating communication. And remember, that's what he calls the communication that we all do, the kind that has moralistic judgment, making comparisons, denial of responsibility. Life alienated communication both stems from and supports hierarchical or domination societies, where large populations are controlled by a small number of individuals to those individuals' own benefit. It would be in the interest of kings, czars, nobles, and so forth that the masses be educated in a way that renders them slave-like in mentality. The language of wrongness, should, and have to is perfectly suited for this purpose. The more people are trained to think in terms of moralistic judgment that imply wrongness and badness, the more they are being trained to look outside themselves, to outside authorities for the definition of what constitutes right, wrong, good, bad. And this is where he says, when we are in contact with our feelings and needs, we humans no longer make good slaves and underlings. So it is a construct of patriarchy, the way that we, patriarchy, capitalism,
Imperialism, colonialism.
the way that we have learned to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And the should or I have to, man, how many of us haven't been dominated by shoulds and have tos?
I would say probably every single solitary human being.
Every day I
Every
hear
adult.
a litany of I should do this, I should do that, I should,
Mm-hmm.
every
And
day.
you know what? And it's funny that you brought that up, because one of the things that came up for me reading this book was, I need to learn how to use nonviolent communication with myself. The voice in my head
Yes.
is certainly not using nonviolent communication at all.
Maybe that is the
Nonviolent
lesson.
communication with myself. Or I do, but it is not often.
What's a bad thought you've had that we could break it down?
Well, today at work. I mean, and I love my job. Don't get me wrong. I love my job. I am so fortunate that I am in a really, really awesome situation. It is ideal. So all of the shit that's in my head, it's in my head. It is my voice.
So what's one of these voices today?
One of them is, I should be faster at doing this job. Why am I not as fast as so-and-so at doing this job.
Comparison.
And so-and-so's been doing this job for 20 years. And I'm comparing myself to somebody who's been doing the job for 20 years.
So Marshall would say that making comparisons is life alienated communication. So what were you observing then?
I was observing, or at least in my own head, I was observing that it takes me so much longer to do anything than another woman in a similar position. I wasn't even.
That still has judgment in it, though.
Oh, it's got all kinds of judgment in it. I'm judging myself all over.
Okay, but if you can take the judgment out of it, what were you actually observing?
That she accomplishes more in a day, in a business day, than I do. Her productivity appears.
Does she have a stack on her desk or something that you can see?
No. But in my head,
No. What are you actually observing?
The number of emails that she responds to, the number of phone calls that she takes.
Okay, so you observe her being very efficient at her job.
Yes, that is a very clear way of putting it. Yes.
Okay, so say that. I observe such and such being
I observe her being very efficient at her job.
I feel. This is a feeling.
I feel inadequate.
Is that a feeling? I'm not good at feelings. I don't know
either.
I don't know. I'm not good at them.
Shit. Inadequate is a feeling. See, that's the thing. Is that
I don't know either. I don't know.
I disagree with him on what's a feeling and what's not. I don't know.
Okay, so let's just say it's a feeling because neither one of us knows.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
So you observe her being good at her job. You feel inadequate because you're needing what? What are you needing?
To feel accomplished.
Are you needing validation?
All the time.
I don't know if that's a need.
Like, dude, I think if that's one thing that I have gotten out of the 2+ years of us doing this podcast, is that I need validation.
Me too.
Almost all the time. And I realized that's a character flaw. That's fine. I get it. I'm working with it.
That's a moralistic judgment. That is a moralistic judgment. Who says that's a character flaw?
I did.
We just determined today that we all have needs. Needy is okay.
Thank you.
All right. What did we just say? Okay. You see such and such doing such and such. You feel inadequate because you're needing validation.
Yes.
Therefore, I now would like
validation.
Stickers. I want stickers on my report card. I don't know if we did this right, Raquel.
I think we did. But I will say, I do get lots of support and encouragement at work. I do.
You need self-validation.
Yes.
Girl.
That is something that I need to work on.
I shouldn't call you girl. Woman.
Yeah, I got to work on the self-validation.
Okay, so my new love, Matthew, my boyfriend, my love, says I love you all the time. And he's like, do I overdo it? And I'm like, no, I need all that validation.
Right?
I will tell you this. This is shocking to me. To be in a relationship with someone who actually says what they're feeling, what they need, and what they want, even if I can't always fulfill all those things, is so great because I have been in relationships where I'm fucking guessing all the time. Does this person like me? Do they not like me? Do they like the way I look? Do they not like the way I look? Do they like what I said? Do they not? Do they like what I cooked? Do they not like? I don't even know if they like me. To be with someone who can tell you what their feelings are, I wouldn't trade that for the world. So in that regard, if we could learn anything from this book, we should at least be telling the people, I love you, Raquel.
I love you.
We should at least be telling people we love them.
Exactly.
At least be sharing our feelings as much as we can.
Absolutely.
I am so out of touch with my feelings.
Girl, same. Or woman. Yes.
Woman.
Same.
Matthew has lists of feelings and lists of
Ooh,
needs, and he gets them out and reads through them when he's trying to
good for him.
he had a major complaint he wanted to tell somebody via email,
Mhm.
or he had an observation he wanted to make, and he created his email based on this communication, which by the time he constructed it took some time. It was really powerful and it was really effective, and it wasn't demeaning, and it wasn't saying, oh, you nasty people. It was saying, I observed this, and then it was saying, I feel this, i I have this need, and this is what I would like. They of course said no, but sometimes that's what happens.
Yeah.
But at least when you say what you want, you have a chance of getting it.
It makes you slow down so that you're then acting out of what you're really feeling as opposed to being reactive.
I'm very reactive.
Same.
He did say on page 196, depression is indicative of a state of alienation from our own needs. The ability to hear our own feelings and needs and empathize with them can free us from depression. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And
I'm not
again,
buying it.
I had the reaction of it's a little too simplistic. I get what he's saying. I get where he's going with that. But it's a little simplistic. And I get that. I get that
Solve world hunger.
he can't solve, world hunger and cure cancer in one book. I get it. I think it would have been a little helpful for me if he had just said at some point, for the sake of this book, some of these practices or whatever may seem a bit simplistic, but for the sake of, do you know what I mean? If he had just acknowledged that there's a layer of nuance that for the sake of brevity or for the sake of making this a book that's not the size of War and Peace, we'll have to just, we can only go so far. We can only go so deep with it. If he had just acknowledged that, because my initial reaction was, does he even realize that he's missing the nuance, that he needs to go deeper? I would like to, and I think I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he does realize that there's nuance that's needed for this. If I weren't in a more evolved state of mind, I would be like, yeah, dude is being just way too simplistic. He doesn't realize, blah, blah, blah. But I'm giving the guy the benefit of the doubt that he realizes that, okay, to get this book down to a size that it is accessible for most people, and that people will actually take the time to sit down and read it, I got to be at a certain surface. I can't go too far into it because it'll just get into the weeds. And I get that.
But do you think, I really believe that reading the book itself, unless I were to set it into practice every single day, would not really do enough to change anything that I'm doing. If I really wanted to delve into nonviolent communication, I would probably need to take that workshop to practice, because even after reading the book, I'm still kind of confused about what are feelings and what are needs and what am I trying to express, and maybe I just need more therapy. I mean, let's be for real.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't? But
Right.
what I think the book is good for is two things. It's an introduction and it plants the seed so that you start thinking about it. And then maybe that will encourage or spur people to dig beyond that. Right? Like when we talk about stuff here on the podcast, we often say, don't stop with just what we're saying. Don't stop with just this episode. Do some research, learn more about it, delve into this. And I think that's what's one of the important things about Rosenberg's book, is that it plants that seed. So now you're aware of it. Even if you don't do any further research, you're aware of it now. You're going to start seeing it and you're going to start picking up on things. So it'll at least get the ball rolling a little bit. So I think it's a start. As far as that goes, looking at it in that way, as this is just the tip of the iceberg, then yes, I think the book achieves all of that.
All right. I would like to read. Are we done talking about the book?
Yeah, yeah.
We have a follower of the podcast who has made several comments recently, and I would like to read one of them and recognize her on the podcast.
Yes, because she's lovely.
Her name is Susanna Craigwick, and she responded initially to the episode that we did on social media. Remember what did we call it? The good things of social media or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she said, I really enjoyed this episode. I think social media for me is like a lot of things. I can see some benefits from it, and I'm thankful for the people I've met through social media. At the same time, I can also embrace the truth of taking time off from it is a good thing. I wrote down some of the people you mentioned and plan to check their pages. I think for me, it has been beneficial to not scroll my feed and to just go directly to the pages and such that interest me, or at least to set a time limit or certain number of posts to scroll past. But I think everyone should do what they feel is best for them. That was a great comment.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, she responded and tagged a bunch of people that she follows on social media as well. And we, as the podcast, followed all of those people so we can check in on their work.
Yeah, I love it when people reach out and becomes a dialogue. It becomes
dialogue. Where's our notes? When people make comments on our podcast, we feel excited
and loved and connected and heard,
because it fulfills our need to be connected and heard.
Absolutely.
Therefore, we would like lots more comments.
Yay!
We did it. Thank you, Susanna. You have given so many great comments. We are so grateful.
Yes, Susanna. Thank you so much for being part of our community. We appreciate you being here. Thank you.
And Susanna, when you make very specific comments, it helps us to know that people are listening. You give us the need of connection. Thank you.
Love it. Love it. This was a really great conversation. I'm glad that you suggested that we read this book and talk about it. And thank you.
Matthew suggested it.
Well, Matthew, thank you for suggesting this book.
Bye, Raquel.
Bye, Jennifer. Thanks, everyone, for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.